we have a DeLorean. Everybody knows when you take a DeLorean 88 miles per hour, it can time travel. And yes, we are going to time travel in this video. Hey, this is WhyBeAre with BeamNG.drive, and today we're going to be taking a look at a mod that adds a DeLorean to the game. And the fun thing about DeLoreans is you don't need to say DMC-12. You say DeLorean, everybody knows this is the vehicle you're talking about. So we have a handful of different options here. 3 of them are stock and 3 of them are modified. We're going to start off with the worst version available. This one has a 3-speed automatic transmission. And I really got to make sure I stay focused for this video, because it's very easy to accidentally go off on a random tangent about DeLorean facts and tidbits. Like they were going to make a bus, and there was this weird off-road golf cart thing they were going to make, and also there was a 4-door DeLorean concept that they didn't actually pay for, and then it became the Lamborghini Marco Polo concept car. Just a lot of weird things like that. But this video is about the mod for BeamNG.drive, and that's what it looks like on the outside, and this is what it looks like on the inside. Inside is nothing spectacular. It just looks like a pretty basic vehicle, but it matches the real interior pretty well. And I always love it when you look behind you and you see the louvers. Someday I will own a car with louvers because it looks so cool when you look behind you and just see the louvers and you feel awesome. The only thing that feels more awesome is if you have a big fat wing and louvers. That's even better. And you do notice there's this kind of weird gap that you can see straight through on the doors, but I don't care, because the important thing is that the doors open the way they're supposed to. We have beautiful gull wing doors that will open up, but they won't really close once you open them up. So they're just going to stay like that as we drive around, and I guess driving with them open from the outside view is a little bit better, because then you can actually see them. And the funny thing about driving with the doors open like this is it feels like you could easily accidentally clip something and tear it off, but that's really not the case, because the doors don't go that high up and they don't extend past the body of the vehicle. So it's actually surprisingly difficult to clip the doors off, although there is an easier way to remove the doors, and that is simply slamming into a wall with them open, and they will fall off just like that. And in addition to the doors coming off, I also saw the engine flying about a little bit. Don't know where it is right now, but it ain't in the engine bay. So here is a look at the damage, and it's surprisingly intact considering the engine has completely fallen out, and it's very easily identifiable as a DeLorean. Now, as I mentioned, this is the worst version of the vehicle because it's simply the slowest one. The 3-speed automatic transmission was paired to the only engine it ever came with, which was a V6 engine that made about 140 horsepower, and the car weighed a little bit over 3,000 pounds. Those two stats together means if we were to do a basic 0 to 88 acceleration test, it'd probably take like 15 to 20 seconds or so, I would expect. So we're going to do a test and see if that's accurate. And you guys know why it's 88 miles per hour, right? I hope you do, because I don't feel like explaining it. Because to me, that's just common knowledge, because Back to the Future is really the movie that made the DeLorean so popular in modern times. So anyways, here's a perfect place to do the test. Speed limit is 40 miles per hour. We're going to go just over double that. And you see it is not fast off of the line. You know, originally, the car was going to have a rotary engine. Then it was going to have a Ford V6. And then finally, they settled on the V6 PRV that gets to 88 miles per hour in about 18 seconds, which seems pretty realistic for my expectations. And it's still pulling surprisingly well. We're going to get up to about 110 miles per hour, and then boom, there is the big crash. And one of the neat things about a rear engine, rear wheel drive car is it can still put down the power. We have absolutely no steering, and the driver would have been crushed, but we can put down the power because the engine is still perfectly intact. Hell, we can kind of drive. Unfortunately, we're scraping too much to do anything except go in reverse. Going in reverse just barely works. Anyways, here is a look at the pretty massive amount of damage on the front of the vehicle. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the next configuration. So this one is slightly better. It still has the exact same engine, but it has a 5-speed manual transmission, which makes it just a little bit faster. For example, if we do the exact same 0 to 88 test, it's maybe a second faster to that speed. Not really noticeable, but technically it should be the superior vehicle. Come on, 88 miles per hour, and kind of funnily, we still only used just the first 3 gears for that. It takes almost 100 miles per hour to get in the 4th gear, and just like the automatic, it keeps pulling surprisingly well based on its stats. But now, how about we crash into this wall just a little bit, nice little scrape along. Oh, that was a bit more than a scrape along, wasn't it? Yeah, that was actually enough to completely immobilize the vehicle. It doesn't look that badly damaged, but it ain't going nowhere. Well, okay, it's rolling backwards a little bit for some reason. Stop that. No more rolling backwards. We need to roll forward and do some more damage. How about we try to get a little bit of airtime with the DeLorean? That should be fun. After all, it's a well-known fact that some DeLoreans can fly. Can this one? I would say no, not really. Ooh, that's not good. This fence is eating my car. All right, so whatever you do, do not crash into this fence because it's hungry. Now let's take a look at the European version of the vehicle. And one of the more unusual differences between the American and European edition is that the European one sits quite a bit lower, and it looks like it has a much more aggressive suspension setup. And you can see this very clearly as we go between the two thumbnails. So there's the American one sitting nice and tall, and there is the European one, which sits much lower to the ground. And it's not just in the thumbnails that you see this. You also see it on the vehicle itself when it spawned up. So the interesting thing about this is, yes, it is accurate that the American one has much more ground clearance than the European one. Why is this? Honestly, I don't know. In addition to that though, we also have an extra reflector down on the bottom of the rear of the vehicle. We have the European style license plates on both the rear and the front of the vehicle. And then we also have some extra DeLorean badges on the rear, and then the front hood as well, which you guys zoom in a little bit, and then you can see it says DeLorean on it. And of course, if you wanted to, you could mix and match the parts. Nothing's gonna stop you. So how does the European one handle compared to the American one? Not that significantly different. If I drive them back to back, I tell myself that the European one should be better, but I don't really notice a significant difference. On both the American and European one, the biggest thing I notice is you do not want to slide this car at all because it's a rear engine vehicle, and once that rear end starts to tip out a bit, it can be very difficult to regain control. And more often than not, instead of trying to control the drift, you're better off just coming to a stop if you want to not crash your vehicle. If you don't care if you crash, then sure, try to drift it all the time. I don't care if you crash your car. Although, couldn't you crash something less valuable? Although now even the regular drift cars like a 240SX are becoming quite rare, aren't they? Anyways, we have now traveled back in time, and look, there's another DeLorean in front of me, except it's me from the past. So we can smash into him and cause a little bit of damage to both of the vehicles. And I think they should still drive after that. Okay, so that's going to do it for the production versions of the vehicle. There's what the damage looks like on the front of mine, and then here's what the damage looks like on the rear of mine from the past. Now, we're going to go to some of the aftermarket versions. We're going to start with the Race Edition, which isn't actually implemented yet according to the description, but we can still have some fun with it. For example, we can change up the color. So let's give this one a gold color because there are some gold DeLoreans. Now, actually getting a gold that matches the real gold color, yeah, I don't care enough to do it. That's close enough for me. And as you can see, when you change the color, both the very rear and the very front of the vehicle stay the same color as they were before. And this makes it where it's kind of interesting because the color on this vehicle matches almost perfectly with the unofficial 5th gold DeLorean. So there are actually 4 real official gold DeLoreans, and they're made as a special promotion. And then there's a 5th one, which is a normal one somebody bought and then they gold plated it, and coincidentally it just matches up perfectly with the one I just made, except theirs actually looked more like gold instead of a kind of off-colored beige. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't gonna put that much time into finding a gold color. But as you can see, the straight line performance of this one is the same as the ones we were driving earlier, it feels like. So it definitely is not quite complete yet, but it does have some cool wheels on it, which you can see. And then also, it has a cool looking engine as well. And it is done. Although we get a really nice view of the engine, don't we? We can perfectly see that that engine is not quite factory stock. And then in addition to that, we can go ahead and take a look at the damage. Overall, not that much damage. It's just damaging key places that managed to mostly immobilize the vehicle. And just for comparison purposes, why don't we take a look at the original engine as well. So we gotta pull away both layers of the trunk, and you can see the engine here does look legit. They actually modeled up an engine. It's one of those things where they really didn't have to do it, but I love that they did. So now let's take a look at the next configuration, which is the turbo version. And once again, we'll take a quick peek at the engine. That worked pretty well. So we can actually see the turbos down here really well. We have one on the left side and one on the right side. They're not really big turbos or anything, but they are definitely a performance improvement over the original engine configuration. And a fun fact about this configuration is that it's almost a production version of the vehicle. So what do I mean by almost? Well, there was official plans to have a turbocharged version of the DeLorean from the very start. But it got delayed, and eventually they decided to just get a separate company to make a turbocharged version of the engine. So a company called Legend Industries made a turbocharged version of the vehicle, and once it was proven to work, DeLorean ordered 5,000 engines to be used in their vehicles. Unfortunately, before any of the engines actually made it into a vehicle, they went bankrupt. So this is a production version of the vehicle in an alternative timeline where they didn't immediately go bankrupt and they were able to put out the turbocharged version, which is surprisingly fast both in real life and in the game. In real life, it was finally able to compete with Porsches and Ferraris, and in the game, this is the kind of performance you would expect out of a vehicle that looks like this. Because when you have a rear engine vehicle that looks nice and sporty like this, you expect it to compete with Porsches and Ferraris, not come with an engine with 140 and change horsepower. If the turbo version actually came out, it really could have changed completely how the vehicle is remembered in terms of performance. How is it in terms of safety? It was, after all, originally called the DeLorean safety vehicle. So we are unfortunately not on our wheels, but we could do a quick flip, ignore the damage that I caused to the roof, and looking at the damage, nothing too interesting there. It actually held up surprisingly well. And now we can take a look at the final configuration option. This one is the V8 swap. Now there are never plans, as far as I know, to originally have a V8 in this car. But come on, who doesn't love a DeLorean with a big fat V8 engine in it? And you can see that V8 does look bigger than the V6s we had earlier. And the original V6 is definitely nothing special. It's not like, oh, you ruined the car by swapping in the V8, because most people, from what I've heard, are not very pleased with the V6 anyways. So with the V8, the performance is pretty close to the V6 turbo we were driving earlier. The biggest difference is the way it delivers the power and the weight distribution. So let's go ahead and smash into this barrier. And ooh, got a little spin going on. Wow. That really started to separate the vehicle from the frame. That was impressive. And the amount of damage overall, quite significant. Also, you might notice that sometimes it looks kind of weird, like the paint just fell off, even though there's no paint on the actual car because it's stainless steel. That is just a part of the vehicle that is under the body panel. It shares the shape of the stainless steel very closely, so that's why it looks like sometimes the paint just fell off. And I should mention, the stability of this car at high speeds is, put simply, awful. Once you get over about 100 miles per hour and you try to do any sort of cornering, it is super sketchy. Although it kind of makes sense, because if you look on the inside and look at the gauges, they only go up to 85 miles per hour, although you can't quite see that, so we can go ahead and turn on the headlights, and now you can very easily see the gauges and see how the headlights light up the area around us. As you see, we are easily exceeding the top speed on the gauge, and we're actually going back over to the other side of the gauges. And we are now going 5 miles per hour. Yeah, I don't think the gauges are accurate anymore once you've ran through them once. Although I do have an interesting idea. With this thing having like a 40-60 weight distribution split, I bet it would be really good for doing donuts. And there's actually a spot in this map designed specifically for donuts because it's realistic. If you ever see an area like this, where you have houses and then there's just this circular area, those circular areas are designed for doing donuts. That is why they are placed there. And just as expected, yeah, the car works perfectly for this. This is why you V8 swapped the DeLorean, so it can do mean donuts. And also probably it's a lot easier to find parts for the V8 engine compared to the V6 it originally had. Because in the US, that was not a very common engine. Although I think in Europe, it would be a lot easier to find parts that would be compatible with this engine. Although, nowadays the car is so popular and it has a cult following I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually pretty easy to get parts for the engine, because there are a bunch of companies out there around the US that specialize in just DeLoreans. Honestly, I have no idea what I'm talking about, so let's just do a crash, because crashes, that's something I know about. Crashing into things is very simple. You just turn the steering wheel in any direction and you will crash eventually, as you just saw. It cannot put down any power, but I do want to get it into the light so we can take a look at the damage just a little bit easier, so hopefully I don't damage it too much as I yank it along. Oh goodness, I tore off the whole rear. Actually, I did that on purpose. Why? I don't know. There we go. So ignoring the additional damage I did, again, the car held up pretty well. Turns out the vehicle originally called the DeLorean safety vehicle is surprisingly safe. Alright, now here's a fun idea I want to do. So we have the other DeLorean sitting way down at the end of this highway. I want to see what happens if we do a side impact. So I got this car moving. We got to get this guy set up and ready to go so we get a fresh car. And then we just park him right in the middle of the highway, the worst possible spot to actually park a car. And then we're going to slam into him at about 70 miles per hour or so. And we're going to see what happens with the gold wing doors. Do they open up on impact or do they stay shut? So we're going to keep it just about, maybe go 65 miles per hour because that's highway speeds. Interesting. So slamming into the side of the vehicle did not cause the door to open up. This is definitely something I want to test a couple of different ways though. So we're going to go ahead and bring this guy back and do a little bit lower speed test. We'll also make sure this guy is nice and centered on the road this time instead of rushing it. And this time we're going to crash into it at a much lower speed, about half the original speed. So we're going to go about 30 miles per hour here, just a nice little boop. And it seems like, once again, the door is going to stay secured even after impact. But we'll do a couple more crashes to see if it will pop open or not. So here is crash number 2. Oh, we got it opened a little bit. Unfortunately, it seems like when we slam into it, it also lodged it a little bit inside of the front fender. So it's not actually going to open up. But we have mangled it where we can see the interior. So there's a definite gap between the door and the rest of the car. So let's go ahead and do one more crash to see if we can pop that door open. But otherwise, I'm thinking really the only way to consistently open the door is probably going to be using the node grabber. So here we go, and 35 miles per hour, really kind of putting it at an angle to pop it open, and it did nothing. So yeah, if you want the doors open, just yoink them like so, and they open up beautifully. And one thing I actually like is how smoothly they open. So if we bring the door down and then just let go, you see it's a nice smooth whoop as it opens up, and it's for both doors, of course. So we can do the same thing over here. We close the door and then whoop. I just love how smooth it is. Now I want to see, is there a way to actually clip the door off without crashing the rest of the vehicle? Because it looks like the doors are almost in line with the body, but they might overhang just the tiniest bit. It's hard to tell, so the easiest way to check is to try to rip them off. So I'm just keeping my eye out for something that'll be good to crash the doors into, and that looks like it'll work. Just a light pole or a signal or anything like that. So there's a light pole, and we're gonna drive very, very close to it, just being right up on the edge. Oh, come on. You can't get over the little screw that's sticking out? Okay, try that again. That didn't work because I was off center now. How about this one? Whoa, it can clip it off, but you're going to be so close, you're basically crashing the car anyways. So yeah, it's really just in line with the vehicle. And you know what? I think there are invisible walls on these poles because there is no reason that should not have hit. That was just really weird. All right, we're going to try this one more time. We got the perfect object to try to crash it into, and no, that time the door stayed. Yeah, it's very, very hard probably to actually get the door to come off without hitting the rest of the vehicle. So here's the next test. Can we close the door using an impact? I don't know, let's just slam into stuff and see what happens. Hey, it actually worked. I closed the door, but I opened the engine bay. So the other thing is, whenever you have a car that's rear engine, I always want to say, oh, that's the trunk. But is it though? I mean, I guess you could store things on top of the engine, but it doesn't look like you could store it that much. And I'm also always sketched out about storing things that close to the engine. Like if you go grocery shopping and you put your milk right there, for example, isn't the milk gonna spoil or something? I don't know. I've never owned a mid-engine car before, so I have no clue what I'm talking about. And I think that little maneuver is gonna destroy the vehicle. So now I want to do something really dumb. And this really dumb thing does require a little bit of setup. So I'll be back once everything is ready to go. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do because it's as dumb as putting a dumb clip at the start of the video where I would say something like, we have a DeLorean. Everybody knows when you take a DeLorean 88 miles per hour, it can time travel. And yes, we are going to time travel in this video. Now, I gotta find the town because I've just been driving aimlessly and not paying attention to where I'm going, because that's the proper place to do some time traveling. And it's on its wheels, nice. Quick look at the damage, and where's that town? Okay, so here we are. The time right now is 10:03, and at exactly 10:04, we will travel back in time. Yes, this is just a joke Back to the Future reference. That's what we're doing right now. And bam, we are right under the electricity going 88 miles per hour. Basically, that's okay. And you know what happens when we hit 88 miles per hour? Bam, we explode in fire, which means we're time traveling. So boom, there goes the car. He just time traveled. He's gone. Don't look over here because over there is just the car's crashed remains. Although actually it's kind of just like that's what remains after the car time travels because the fire does stay on the road. That was a fun little thing to do, but now we're going to go ahead and do something we do every single video, which is Leap of Death. And before we start dumping things down Leap of Death, there are a few things about the vehicle I want to mention. First off, there is plans for a full Back to the Future version of the vehicle. In fact, you can kind of see hints of that because up here in the top right of the screen, it says Time Circuits Switch, and you can press E, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't actually do anything at this point in time. And apparently, that version is going to have actual time travel. I don't know what the developer means by that, but it could be very, very interesting. Next up, there's some parts that are available for the vehicle that were not in the configurations. So first off, if we go to the tailgate and then we go to the tailgate spoiler, we can add the whale tail rear spoiler. And also, if we go to the interior, we can add the air freshener. It's called the Fluxing Air Freshener. And honestly, there needs to be a mod that just adds a bunch of generic air fresheners and fuzzy dice to the mirrors of the vehicles. That way when you're driving around in the interior, you can actually see them bouncing around because it is kind of amusing watching it bounce around as we drive. And it really does bounce around a lot when we're bouncing all over the place. And I don't even know where I'm driving at this point. I think, yeah, I have fallen off a Leap of Death, but I don't want to do that quite yet. So those are the two biggest things that I wanted to show you of the parts. Now, for Leap of Death, we're going to do something a little bit unusual. We're going to pop open the doors and then go down Leap of Death. And then we're going to do it again with the doors closed, and we're going to see, does it make a significant difference? So here we go, doors closed, nice and straight, nice and steady, beautiful flight. So what is it going to do? Now, this is the one with the V8 engine, so it is very, very back heavy. That was a pretty good flight. It might be a 2-impact collision to get down to the very bottom. It depends how well it slides right here, and the answer is not very well at all. This is going to be at least 3, maybe 4 after that unfortunately unlucky impact. So there's 3, here's 4, and that's not really another impact, but there we go, all the way to the very bottom. And that's what remains of the vehicle, which, well, it isn't really much. So now we're going to try the exact same thing. This time, though, we have the doors closed. I want to see, does it make a significant difference or not? So here we go. So far, it looks pretty much the same. Is it going to change it up? It's a little different, maybe, but that could just be down to the way that I hit the ramp. It wasn't a huge difference like some of the other cars that have their doors that can open and close. Alright, now we're going to just let it fall to the ground. One thing that is kind of interesting, I'm not going to bother counting how many impacts it takes to get to the very bottom here because it's a lot. Because that first impact really slowed it down. We got some fire coming in, and come on, get to the bottom, don't get stuck. How is that door still here? It must be somehow attached to the vehicle invisibly. Oh, it did not make it to the water. Oh well. Anyways, until next time, this is WhyBeAre, and remember, if you like or dislike this video, I will know. I can tell because something Back to the Future reference. So do the right thing, and I'll see you next time.